Good morning, I'm Jon Thelen. Today I'm Fish Ed. We're out doing some spring walleye fishing, and this is one of my favorite times of the year to be on the water, and I'll tell you why. The fish are just transitioning into what I call the bite. I mean, they're done with the spawn. Everything's wrapped up now. The fish are actually moving, and once they start getting to spots like what we're fishing today, they're here for one reason. They're here to start eating, and usually that means you're gonna have a pretty doggone good bite. Stay right where you're at. Fish Ed's coming up. There he is. Got it right there. Got him. Ooh, that feels like a pretty good fish. Boy, this is a big fish, whatever it is. You know, one thing about this time of the year is when these fish start moving too. I mean, it's probably the most likely time of the year that you can catch a variety of species, even if you're just walleye fishing. And what I mean by that is, when these fish all move and start heading to wherever it is that they're gonna eat, what happens is all the food's in one spot. So when all that food is sitting right here, what happens is all these fish end up here for one reason. I mean, this is where the buffet is. The line is right here. So all of a sudden, you'll end up, I'm gonna have to come over to this side. I got myself set up here on the wrong side. The way this fish went, he's actually making the decisions here. But the way it gets set up, what do we got here? Got a smallie. And see, this is what happens. There's a lot of walleyes gonna be here today, but there's also gonna be smallmouth bass here because they've made their move here. Oh yeah, look at this big brown back. It's an awesome fish. And that's one of the cool things about what we're doing here, is the fact that you will get a smorgasbord of fish. And man, for me, it's just all about catching. I mean, this is one of those days. This is one of those times of the year. I mean, I'm not tournament fishing. I'm not guiding for walleyes. That thing right there, that smallmouth bass, is just as fun to catch as any walleye, but they're gonna be all mixed together. Now, one of the things that'll happen, I started up here a little bit shallower, and sometimes those smallmouth, they'll be on the shallow side. So maybe what we'll do, we'll go down this a little further, see what happens. I missed a fish, got that fish. We'll find out if those are all the bass, and if they are, I might just slide out a couple feet. But it really isn't a big difference because that bait is all lined up right along this spot right here. I mean, it's gonna be one of those days where we're just gonna catch a lot of fish, and every time I hook up, we're not gonna know what it is. That's a great way to get her going though. There he is, eating at it. Oh, did he set it down? Oh, he did hang on to it. This fish here, I felt him and I kind of went with him and I couldn't figure out what was actually going on there. And what he must have done is picked it up and kind of swam at me because, and it's another smallmouth, I'm pretty confident. But he kind of swam at me and I couldn't figure out what was going on there, and I thought maybe he set it down. But he didn't. He had it when I went back to him, and man, I'll tell you, one of the things that, you know, I can point out while we're sitting here catching these big smallmouth, trolling minnows around, kind of catching this smorgasbord of fish is, you know, what I'm using is really, really simple. And I'll show it to you here in a sec. Let me get this fish in here, but we're just fishing a Lindy Live Bait Jig. And you know, if any fish in the world is going to bend a jig hook, I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be smallmouth, because there isn't a fish out there that fights like smallmouth bass. And one of the things I'll tell you is day in and day out, you do not bend these hooks on these Lindy Live Bait Jigs, but you can see where he's hooked. I mean, these are strong, powerful fish. Smallmouth bass are phenomenal when they decide to go the other way, and look at that, popped right out of there, nice and easy. But these hooks, man, They're sharp and they're strong. And what's really cool about the Lindy Live Bait Jig is this. Number one, you know, clean line tie eye. A little bit of wind out here today. Never got to mess around with digging paint out of an eye. It's already gone when you get it. And that's because this jig is sprayed. But the other thing is we use a good quality hook. Now, whether it's the live bait jig with this short shank wide gap hook, this is made to do what we're doing today. It's made to fish minnows. It's made to fish while you're moving a little bit. Don't get me wrong, you can jig it vertically, but it's really made for movement. And this jig was designed by a good friend of mine, Jeff Sundin. He designed this jig for fishing up in those areas, up in Winnie and on Leech and Lake of the Woods and all those areas. And I'll tell you what, they work everywhere. This is the Lindy Live Bait Jig. But the big thing I wanted to talk about there is the hook, because you just don't bend these hooks. And I think that's what's really cool, is that's how you judge a good jig versus a bad jig. There's a lot of jigs out there, and you can buy cheap jigs. There's no doubt about it. But usually where there's money saved in a jig is in the hook, and we haven't sacrificed that with this Lindy Live Bait Jig or the Lindy Jig. There's one. Wow, did that fish hammer it. I just turned the boat. I just made, that's the first pass I've made and not touched a fish coming down here. So I just turned the boat and thought, I'm gonna go against the wind for a pass, and let's just see if it makes a difference, because I do believe that some days fish get set up a little differently as the wind changes. Winds come up a little bit, and maybe just going against the wind would make a difference here. And you know what? Right away, boom. I mean, just as I made that turn, I hook up. I'm pretty sure I got a good walleye here. That's what it feels like. We're gonna go back over here. He's kind of telling me where he wants to go. Man, I think this is one of the funnest tactics that there is that I do. Just going out, pulling jigs around, pulling jigs with minnows, because ultimately, man, it doesn't matter what kind of fish you're talking about. Ooh, look at that. Perfect. Jig popped out of him right there. I'm just gonna lift him right out of there, show him to you, and we'll get him back. Look at that. Man, they're all mixed together, and they're all mixed together because we're at that time of the year where they're all doing one thing. They're eating. They're all done spawning. The smallmouth are done spawning, the walleyes are done spawning, and they're all hitting that first set of structures and eating. I want to explain the location thing a little bit more to you. So let's get this fish back in the water, and then let me go through this a little bit, because this is the type of location that's available on so many different bodies of water, and it's easy to find. All I'm looking for is that first set of rocks, that first reef off the shoreline. Maybe it's that first little transition area, it's just a sunken island. It might even be soft bottom. Doesn't matter. It's that first feature off of the shorelines. And you can find them so easy on our maps today. I mean, it's just simple with these sonar units and all the mapping we have to find these spots. And I'll tell you what, this one here, these fish spawned right in along this shoreline. All they've done is move about a mile, and they're just stacked up here, and they're all milled up in here because there's food here, and it's the first place they stop to just eat. But here's the thing, this is an ideal spring location for that week or two after the spawn, because those fish, they all get here and they get stuck here because they stop, because it's the first place that they can find food and they can just sit and eat. Got him. Yep, feels like another good one. It's a walleye. You can tell with him, he's gonna take me over to this side of the boat. You know, it's kind of a believer in letting the fish take you where he wants to take you, especially, you know, I fishing alone so often. But if a fish wants to take you to the other side of the boat, don't try to bring him around and keep him out of the motor. Just go ahead and let him go, because the reality of it is, you try to bring him down under that motor. I've been cut off more times. I've been cut off in tournaments trying to think that I could move a fish the direction I wanted him to move, and man, it can cost you that fish and frustrate the heck out of you, where it's just as easy to do what I did here. Just go right over the top of that motor with your line, and oh, that's a good eye. Oh yeah, you just saw the bottom of the boat or the light of day, one of the two. He didn't like it. Here we go. All right. Oh yeah, good eye. Look at that, right after making a color change. I switched from that green one to this orange one for this pass. And that quick, we got this guy in the boat. I'll tell you what, this is such a fun tactic, and it's so overlooked. And you look at every one of these fish I've hooked today, it is pretty simple. I mean, I'm not doing anything here that anybody can't go out and do. This is really, really easy. I mean, it's a simple tactic, and you can go out and do it. You can bring the kids out and do it, and I'll tell you what makes it so easy. You can go out and do this, and do it based on the fact that you can put rods and rod holders if you want. And fish like that, he's gonna hook himself. I mean, I'm hand holding today, but man, I've been in and out of the rod holder, and these fish, they'll hook themselves. What a great eye. Great way to wrap it up. Get out and drag some jigs around, man. I'll tell you what, it's easy and it catches fish.